Hey guys, this is Tech Howdy. I welcome you to another video tutorial where we are building this CMS application using ASP.NET Core 3 and Angular 10. In this video tutorial, we will be continuing to work on our profile view. So here our object right now is to display the details of the admin user in the profile view, and we are currently working on this profile view. As mentioned in the last video tutorial, that we would need to create a country service which will be responsible for returning a list of countries that are needed to be shown in this drop-down. This drop-down is being created by the chosen library, and we can make use of the search features so our users don't have to scroll down to search their respective countries. They can just search it using this search box that's available in the drop down itself. Now these name of the countries are being loaded from a API service that we are going to create. So our application will be calling the API service or the API endpoint to be more precise. This API endpoint will return the names of the countries, and we will create this drop down with the available list that we have, which contains the name of the countries. Now as soon as the user selects the country, the drop down here which says state also gets changed, and the respective names of the states also appear. If a country doesn't have a state, then this particular select option will be grayed out. So if I go to Canada, I will see options for states that are part of Canada. But if I go to certain countries which don't have any states, then in that case, the option gets grayed out. For example, I've selected this country, Cocos Islands, and this doesn't have any state, so the state option gets grayed out. Just to give you an idea of how the feature is going to be implemented. So the main thing remains, which is to get the countries in order to make use of this drop down. So let's go ahead and first create this country service. While creating the country service, we need to make sure that this list of countries is particularly stored somewhere. Either we can store it on a JSON file, and we can grab that information from the JSON file, which will be saved on our server, or we can create the names of the country and store them in our database. We can have a country table which will contain the list of information related to countries. So in this project, we will go ahead and create that country table. So since we are creating a country table, we will now need to create a country model, which will hold the respective properties that need to be mapped over to country object. So let's go ahead and create this country service in our project, and then create the API to get or fetch the names of the countries and states. So in the model service, let's go ahead and add a new class. We will call this class as CountryModel. So let's go ahead and add a new class, call this class as CountryModel, and then hit new. Now we don't need the constructor here, so I'll get rid of it. And inside the CountryModel, we will add the properties that are mapped over to the country object. So here we have added the properties that we will require. As obvious, we are going to create a table in our database. So the column, we should have a primary key in the table. So we have the ID for the country. Then I have created another string, which is the country ID that I'm going to use to recognize the country. So I will manually add this ID, whereas this is the primary ID that gets incremented or gets created by the database itself, whereas this country ID is the custom ID for each country that we will be assigning. Now we have a 2-digit code. For example, if the country is Canada, then the 2-digit code will be CA, and if the country is US, then US. So if the country is United States, so it's US. So we have a 2-digit code for each country with the name of the country, the phone code if applicable, the flag of the country. We are going to show the flag icon, we will have the states. Now here the name of the states that the country, the states that belong to that country, we will concatenate them into a string and save them in the database. We don't want to create a column for each state because we don't know how many states exist in a country. So states can be added and states can be removed. So based on that, we will just concatenate these values and add them in the database. Then we have created a not map property where the column will not be created in the database, but then we will make sure that we convert the string of states to an state list and map it over to this state list property that we are creating. So that's all we need in the country model. So let's save this, and now use the DB context initializer method. Now if you are not familiar with the structure of the database in this project, we have created the database using entity framework core. We have three parts of the video tutorial that's in the video tutorial series. You will find it in the playlist. Here we have a initialize method that initializes the content in our database, like adding default users. Now in the same initialize method, we also want to create the countries and populate these country names and the state names in the database table. Now, where do we get these country names from? For that, I have created a gist in GitHub gist, and you can find this link in the video description. I will add it. I've created two versions of the file. If you don't want to add the names of the countries to your database and want to keep them in a JSON file, so you can use this countries.json gist, which I have created, which contains the country related information, their names, their phone code, their IDs, and so on. Similarly, if you want to use the C# version, which you can find in the project code itself, or you can find the C# file or the CS file here with all the names of the countries created and populated. So I've created a class over here. So I'm going to leave the links in the video description. So we are going to make use of the country model uh, C# file or C# class in our project because we are using the .NET framework. So here, now what we want to do is we want to get the list of these countries and then add it to our country table. So before we add the list to the country table in the database, we need to get this list. And to get this list, we are going to create a new service in our application. We are going to call this service as country service. So let's go ahead and add this new project. We are going to select web and console, then go to library, class library. Make sure that the class library is a .NET Core class library, and then hit next. Here we will name this project as country service. We will make sure that we are creating the project in the folder which contains all the class library projects, or the main project as well. So go to desktop here. So I'll select the folder which contains all my projects. Now create this by hitting open and then create. Now the country service project will be created. I don't need this default class, so I'll get rid of it. Also, I will need to import the country model, which is in the model service. So let's add reference to the model service project. Also, we will add reference to our logging service in case if there are any errors, we can log it. Let's click OK. Now let's go ahead and add our class and interface, the usual structure that we follow in each service, which is the class and interface that we create. So let's go ahead and create the class and interface. So I'll call this class as country SVC. And then I will add a interface that will be implemented by this class. So new file, interface, I country service, and let's hit new. Go back to the country service and then here we will make sure the class implements this interface. Now in this class we will create the list of countries and then return this list of countries to the initializer method that will add this list of countries to our database before the application starts. So it will make sure that the country table is ready for use before the application is started and running. So here I don't need the constructor, so I will get rid of the constructor, and here inside this class I will just need two methods. One which will return the list of countries. Second, this is an extension method where we will add all the list of countries, and this extension method will be called by this getCountries method. So first we will add the missing references to system.threading.task because we want to make this process asynchronous, and we will add the reference to collections, so system.generic.collection, and reference to our country model which is part of model service project. Now the next thing we want to do is this method we need to reference it in the implement it in the interface that we have created, and also add the missing references over here. So now this method can be accessed using this interface. So in our country service, let's first go ahead and create this extension method, start working on it. Here we are going to create a return a list of countries uh, when this method is called. So let's create the logic. So here I will add the logic. So let's go to the start of the method because this is going to be a lengthy list of names of countries and states. So here we are going to create a task and then run this task. This task will basically create a list of countries and assign it to this country models variable. So as you know that the list of countries, it's going to be a very lengthy list as you can see. So I have to scroll all the way down to the end of the list, and then I'm looping onto this list. And so the state list basically contains the names of the states associated with the countries, and here what I'm doing is uh, I'm just concatenating these names using a pipe symbol. Now we have made the country model or created the country model, and the states is a string, it's not an array. We cannot add an array to the database column. Therefore we need to add the names of the countries as a string, and therefore I have created this loop which basically concatenates the list of the state names for that country, and then we are returning this country model back to the requesting method. So in this case it will be our method get countries async, which is going to call this private method which will return a list of country models. So here inside this method, all we need to do is create an object called as country models or whatever you want to name it, which will be a list of country models, and we will assign the value returned by our country list or the list that we are creating to this object. We will catch any exceptions using Serilog. We have added the reference to logging service already, and that should be it for our country service. We are not going to add any other methods in this service. In case if you want to add any other methods like editing or updating any country or adding a new country, so you can go ahead and create that method over here. I'm not going to do that for this project. This should be it, just these two methods that will be used in the entire uh, application that we are creating. So we can close the country service, and now the country service is created. So let's go to the DB context initializer. Here in the DB context initializer, first thing we need to do is, since we have created the country service, we need to reference the country service inside the data service project. So we'll go and add the reference to our country service in the data service project and then click OK. Once we have added the reference, the next thing that we want to do is we would need an instance of the country service in order to access the method that we just created, and we can do that by calling the iCountry as we see, and we will call this as country service SVC. Now we can reference this iCountry service using country service import statement. And now we can use this country service to access the method that we created that returns a list of country models. I'll go ahead and create the or add the countries in the database. So populate the countries in the database using the country service. We will get the list of countries, and if the length of the countries collection is greater than 0, which means we have the countries in this list, then we will go ahead and add them. We have not yet created the countries DB set, so let's also add that. So if we go back to the application DB context, here we would need to add this countries DB set. So here I'm going to add the DB set for countries, save this, and if I go back here I should not see the errors. So I'm using add range here because I'm adding multiple country objects. So I am using the add range async method, and this is an asynchronous method, so I have to use the await operator. So now one more thing that we would need to do, since we have added an additional parameter here for country service in the initialize method, we need to make sure we pass that additional parameter in the program class. So here if we go to the program class, here we are calling the initialize method. See, it's giving us an error because we are missing a parameter here. So we would need to get the country service. So first thing I would want to do is go ahead and add the reference in the main project for country service. Then I will have to create a object here. I'll call this country service, and I will get the I country SVC service, add the missing import statement, and now I can pass this country service over here. Since I have created this country service, I also need to add it to the startup class so that it's injected as a dependency, because when we are trying to get the required service, it's going to get it from the pipeline of the application. So it's going to look for the instantiated services over here. So here just after the cookie service, I can add the country service, and I will add the country service as a transient service, which means for every request a new object is instantiated. So let's go and add the missing import statement. So now when the program file will try to get the required service, it should not throw an error. And once it has the service, it can pass it to the initialize method, where the initialize method will then use this to get the country list of countries and then add them to the table. Okay, so now this is created and done. Just to keep in mind that this will be added only once in the database, because first thing we are checking is if the users exist, and if the users exist, then we are returning, basically ending this initialize method. So this method will not further execute and this code will not be called. So if we don't have any users, first the users will be added, then the countries will be populated. So it's only be going to called once. So if you are thinking why I have not added an if condition here to check if the countries exist, we don't need it over here. So I'm going to save this, and now let's close the initialize method. So that's done. So our country service basically is complete. We have implemented all the required logic that we need. Only thing that we need to do is now go ahead and update the migrations in order to create those countries table or the DB set, and then we would have to basically drop our database and run the application again. But we will do it after we have implemented all the logic for the profile view, so that we can test and run the application at once. Because right now if we try to run the application, it's not going to run because there are many missing parts in the application that need to be filled before we go ahead and run this application. If you try to run it, you will get an error. So let's go ahead and continue working on the profile view that we were doing. So let's go back to the profile controller of the admin area, and in the profile controller we were working on the index view. And if we go to the views, and go to Profile. Here inside this method or this function, which is our JavaScript function, we need to implement the logic to load the user's profile. So let's do that and complete that in the next video tutorial. Then we can run and test the application. So please like and subscribe our channel Tech Howdy. If you have any questions, use the comment section. If there are any files missing in the repo, use the comment section. I will update it, and all the code will be available in our DevOps repo. Link will be in the video description. Thank you.